Yeah.
Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, bringing you some of the best college football news, predictions, and analysis. Make sure to like this video, go follow us on Twitter at Gridiron Expert, and check out our official website, thegridironexpert.com, where you can sign up for our weekly newsletter, which just came out today, and also sign up for our expert picks, which will be coming out tomorrow. The links for all those things are in the description below, so do not miss out on any of the college football content. It just seems that every other week we have a phenomenal week of college football. Week 7 was amazing. Week 9 was great. And now week 11 may be the most anticipated week of college football of this 2019 season. Because guys, we have two, not one, but two battles of the unbeatens, as number 5 Penn State travels to take on number 13 Minnesota. And then, of course, the game of the century as number 1 LSU takes on number 2 Alabama at Bryant-Denny Stadium in Tuscaloosa. So like we always do, we are here to break down the top 5 biggest games, none bigger than these first 2 that we have up on the board, but we'll address the other 3 as well, giving you our insight and, of course, sharing our prediction for these 5 games as we prepare for Week 11. So we'll kick off with the first battle of the unbeaten as 8-0 Penn State takes on 8-0 Minnesota, one of the more surprising teams in college football this season. Now, this is a game that I expect to be fairly low scoring, a big defensive battle if you ask me, because both of these teams have very, very solid defenses. Penn State more so than Minnesota. I think Penn State has maybe one of the best, if not the best defense in the entire country. They're well on up there with a team like Ohio State, who luckily they get to face off here in just a few weeks. Penn State's allowing just 9.6 points per game. They have a ferocious pass rush, and they're allowing just 68.4 rushing yards per game, which doesn't bode well for a team like Minnesota, who averages 204.5 rushing yards per game this season. Doesn't bode well for them. Doesn't bode well for a Minnesota team that has looked well offensively, but has been extremely balanced. So if you take away a run game like Minnesota has relied on so much, they're going to have to rely more on that passing game. And we'll get to that in a second, but I have been extremely impressed with Sean Clifford and KJ Hamler and the chemistry that they have built this season. One of the best quarterback-wide receiver duos in college football this year. We didn't know how Penn State was going to respond with the amount of players that they lost, losing Trace McSorley, losing some big-time players on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. But Sean Clifford has come in, done a phenomenal job, better than I think anyone could have hoped for and better than anyone expected, and he has Penn State in the hunt for the college football playoff once again under James Franklin. Now, Minnesota, as we mentioned, is one of the bigger surprise teams of 2019. They're 8-0. They're looking good. They're averaging 38.4 points per game. The defense has been solid. But here's my problem with Minnesota. They have not been tested. Golden Gopher fans, plug your ears. You might not want to hear this, but you simply have not been tested. Your first 3 games against inferior opponents, Fresno State, South Dakota State, guys like that. South Dakota State, good team out of the FCS, but still, all those games were very close, one-possession games. Since then, yeah, they've run the table in Big Ten play, winning a lot of those games in blowout fashion. But the Big Ten teams that Minnesota has beaten, Purdue, Illinois, Nebraska, Rutgers, and Maryland, have a combined record of 17-28. The only team that currently, out of those teams that we mentioned, that has a winning record is Illinois. They're 5-4 after winning 3 straight games over Wisconsin and Rutgers, and of course, earlier this season, losing to Eastern Michigan. So while Illinois looks great, and they also beat Purdue, while they look great right now, they have not been a solid team all season long. Not an impressive win to add to Minnesota's resume. So they have not been tested. I like Penn State big in this one. Minnesota's going to be hyped. They're ready for this game. They're undefeated. Big Ten title hopes still intact. Playoff hopes maybe still intact. But the resume is not there. They haven't been tested. Penn State has been tested. I like the Nittany Lions to get the job done on the road. Then, of course, the big one. The one where everybody in the country, their eyes will be on this game one way or another. Number 1 LSU at number 2 Alabama. If this sounds familiar, it's because it is. Because 8 years ago, we were in the exact same scenario. Number 1 LSU, number 2 Alabama, both undefeated, at Bryant-Denny Stadium. You can't ask for anything better. And it's crazy that 8 years, almost to the date, only a 4-day difference, that we have this exact same matchup. Now, it should be noted that LSU has not beaten Alabama since these two teams last met as number 1 and number 2 in 2011. LSU won that game at Bryant-Denny Stadium, but then fell in the national championship the same year to the Crimson Tide, losing 21-0. Since Alabama's national championship victory over LSU that same year, they've won 8 straight over the Tigers, including 6 by double digits. That also includes a 29-0 blowout win over LSU last year in Death Valley. But a lot's changed in a year. A lot has changed in a year. Joe Burrow is putting up Heisman numbers. He is by far the Heisman candidate, the front runner for the Heisman Trophy in 2019. 30 touchdowns, just 4 interceptions, leading an offense that averages 46.8 points per game. They have quality wins across the board. They've beaten Florida. They've beaten Texas. They've beaten Auburn. LSU is taking care of business left and right, and it's all because of what Joe Burrow is doing on the offensive side of the ball. I guarantee you, if he wasn't doing this, the LSU would have dropped at least one of those games, and a lot of their other games would have been much closer than they've been this season. But the Tigers' problem this year has been on the defensive side of the ball, and things don't get any better, don't help them out any. Now they've lost Michael Divinity at linebacker, the team's leader in sacks. Yeah, he only has 3 sacks. Yeah, he wasn't necessarily a huge starter, if you want to call it that, but when you lose a guy that's your team leader in sacks that does have experience before playing in the biggest game of the season, that does hurt. They're still holding hope that he will come out and back for the rest of the season, but right now he's taking a break and he will not play against Alabama. Now, LSU, we mentioned their problem is also on the defensive side of the ball. They're allowing 217.5 passing yards per game. Alabama's averaging 338.6 passing yards per game. And many will say, well, maybe those numbers will decline if Tua Tagovailoa doesn't play on Saturday. Tua's playing on Saturday. I can guarantee you that. There is no way that Tua Tagovailoa does not play in the biggest game of the season for both LSU and Alabama. No way he misses this game. They say he's going to be a game-time decision. It's a high ankle sprain, and yes, that's serious, and yes, you don't want to rush it. But Alabama will do everything in their power to have him back for this game. Tua will do everything in his power to be back for this game, and I guarantee you he will be playing on Saturday afternoon. Now, we mentioned LSU struggles defensively, and the same can be said for Alabama, a team that their defense has not looked like it's been in recent years under Nick Saban. They're allowing 180.1 passing yards per game, and when you're facing a Joe Burrow team that's averaging nearly 380 passing yards per game, something's going to give there. And I'm leaning more towards the LSU side here, that LSU is going to still be able to put up numbers against an Alabama defense that has not been as elite as we have seen in recent years. But in this game, we talked about defense. We know it's going to be high scoring with two of the best offenses in the country. But someone's got to make a play defensively. Who's it going to be? Statistically, Alabama owns the edge there. Alabama owns the home field advantage. I like the Alabama defense to make the stop when it matters the most. They get a late stop against LSU and beat the Tigers at home. LSU's playoff hopes are not ruined. They are still very much intact because I expect this to be a close game. But right now, with this win over the Tigers, Alabama will become in sole possession of first place in the SEC West. More than likely will advance to the SEC championship game. And if they win that, the committee will, of course, have many questions as to whether or not a one-loss LSU team deserves to be in the top 4. And if you ask me, they 100% deserve to be in that final top 4. Moving down the list, we have another ranked versus ranked matchup. Number 18, Iowa, at number 16, Wisconsin. This is going to be a fun one, and if you like defense, this is absolutely the game for you. And many will say, well, why is this such a big game anyways? Yeah, sure, it's ranked versus ranked, but Wisconsin's not what they were a few weeks ago, before that loss to Illinois, before that loss to Ohio State, the blowout loss. Here's the thing. If Penn State does, in fact, beat Minnesota on Saturday morning, the winner of this game is one game back from first place in the Big Ten West. And get this, Minnesota has yet to play Iowa or Wisconsin. So the winner of this game is one game back of Minnesota in the standings, and they have yet to play Minnesota. They win that, they become in first place of the Big Ten West and will earn a spot in the Big Ten championship game. So this game between the Hawkeyes and the Badgers is absolutely a big one. And we said if you like defense, it's the game for you, because these are some of the stingiest defenses in not just the Big Ten, but maybe even in the entire country. Iowa's lone losses are to Penn State and Michigan, but they struggle offensively, 24.4 points per game. They only had 12 points against Penn State, 3 points against Michigan, but they held Penn State to 17 points and held Michigan, whose offense is clicking now, to 10 points. They're allowing just about 10 points per game this season. It's pretty dang good. Wisconsin has losses to Illinois, has a loss to Ohio State, but they are way better than that, and they are way better offensively than Iowa, averaging 35.6 points per game and 216.4 rushing yards per game. But the kicker in this one is how dominant these defenses are. Can Jonathan Taylor get anything going on the ground here? You know, he's technically still a Heisman Trophy contender. We've got our Heisman watch up here. We'll address that. He's not on the board, you'll notice. One game does not make or break a Heisman's case. Even though Joe Burrow is the favorite, Jonathan Taylor should still be in consideration, but to be in the Heisman Trophy consideration, to be in that race, you have to be able to perform against tough teams. You have to be able to perform in the big games against elite defenses. Jonathan Taylor was unable to do that against Ohio State, and I'm curious to see if he'll be able to do that against Iowa, a defense that allows just 87.8 rushing yards per game. If he's unable to get anything going on the ground against Iowa, take him out of the Heisman consideration for good. Because it's fantastic if you can rush for hundreds and hundreds of yards against Central Michigan and South Florida, guys like that. It's another thing when you can do it against elite defenses within your conference. This game, because of the elite defenses on the ground, especially for Iowa and Wisconsin, will be won through the air. And while Nathan Stanley is a phenomenal quarterback for the Hawkeyes, I like Wisconsin at home with Jack Cohn, a guy that surprised me a lot this season. I like the Badgers to get the job done at Camp Randall Stadium. They keep their Big Ten title hopes alive and practically ruin their rivals on Saturday afternoon. Farther down, we have number 20 Kansas State at Texas. Once again, why is this a big game? Because the winner keeps their Big 12 title hopes alive, much like Iowa and Wisconsin. Both of these teams are 3-2 in conference play. We know Baylor is undefeated in the Big 12, and Oklahoma only has one loss right now. Kansas State, if it had to come down to it, would own the tiebreaker over Oklahoma because the Wildcats handed the Sooners their lone loss of this season. So the winner of this game keeps their title hopes intact. The loser is absolutely out with 3 conference losses. Now, another reason this game is up here is because of history. Because of the thrillers that we've been given the past 3 years between the Wildcats and the Longhorns. Last year, Texas won just 19-14. The year before, Texas won just 40-34. So a 5-point win, a 6-point win, and in 2016, Kansas State won 24-21. Tons of one-possession games within the past 3 years between Kansas State and Texas, and I can pretty much predict that I think it's going to be another one on Saturday afternoon. Kansas State, absolutely a major surprise team in 2019. They've clinched a bowl game in Chris Kleiman's first year with the Wildcats, 6-2, quality wins over Mississippi State, Oklahoma, and avoided the trap game against their rival in Kansas, annihilating the Jayhawks in front of a sell-out crowd. I mentioned that back in the preseason, I thought Chris Kleiman inherited the best situation out of all the brand new Big 12 coaches. Once again, he continues to prove me right every single week. He inherited the most talent, and he inherited the most experienced quarterback, Skylar Thompson, who has over 1,300 yards through the air and 7 touchdowns, but has done most of his damage on the ground, as the majority of Kansas State's offense has, with 331 rushing yards and 10 touchdowns. This Kansas State team has a dominant defense, and they thrive with their rushing game. They average 217 rushing yards per game. It's pretty dang good, tearing up these Big 12 defenses. Now, Texas, they've been disappointing. This was a year that Texas was supposed to be back. A year that Texas was maybe going to be a college football playoff contender. And they already have 3 losses. LSU, Oklahoma, understandable. Those are 2 losses against quality teams. The TCU loss, where Ellinger threw 4 interceptions, that's inexcusable. 10 points, tons of turnovers, sloppy game. That doesn't look like a team that's back, and that does not look like a team that deserves to be playing for a Big 12 title and deserves to be playing for a spot in the playoff. Texas isn't ranked right now, but they're still a solid team. They're averaging 39.1 points per game. Ehlinger is still one of the better quarterbacks in the Big 12. Whether you want to hear that or not, it is absolutely true. Still one of the better ones out there. Over 28 touchdowns this season, over 2,300 yards to the air, but their downfall has been their defense. They're allowing 31.5 points per game. It's not good. They haven't been very good against the run either. But I like Tom Herman. I like him a lot. And I like Tom Herman with any team coming off a bye week, especially after a disappointing loss. I like Texas, well-rested, angry, ready to get back on the field. They beat the 20th ranked Kansas State Wildcats and keep their Big 12 title hopes alive. I like Texas to get the job done at home. And then finally, Iowa State at number 9, Oklahoma. Once again, a Big 12 game that has a little bit of history. We know 2 years ago, Iowa State went on the road and defeated Oklahoma. So the last time here, the Cyclones came in and beat the Sooners 38-31, one of the biggest upsets of 2017. Last year, in Ames, Oklahoma got their revenge. They beat the Cyclones by 10, 37-27. Expect another great game here in Norman. Iowa State's only been given an 18.1% chance to win this game, but they still have one of the better quarterbacks in the Big 12 with Brock Purdy. They're averaging 328.4 passing yards per game. He already has over 2,500 passing yards this season, and the offense is averaging over 35 points per game in 2019. If this game becomes a shootout, which I think it very much could be, Iowa State has the firepower to match them every step of the way. Iowa State has the offensive firepower to match Jalen Hurts in Oklahoma every step of the way if it becomes a shootout. But the question is their defense. Can they stop Jalen Hurts? You can trade blows all day long, but eventually you've got to get a stop. Eventually you've got to get a turnover. Oklahoma, as many people want to criticize them, as many people want to criticize them after the loss to Kansas State, and as many people want to criticize the Big 12 for not playing defense, Oklahoma has proven to me that they can play defense. Yeah, they didn't do it against Kansas State, I get it. But before that, I've seen it. It's there. The potential is there. And I think it shows this Saturday. An Oklahoma team like Texas, anxious to get back on the field after a bye week, coming off a disappointing loss. Texas to TCU, Oklahoma to Kansas State. They're averaging 49.3 points per game. They still have Jalen Hurts, guy that's on our Heisman watch, one of the best players in the entire country. This is a major bounce-back game for a team that is one of the most explosive offensively. I think it's a shootout, but Oklahoma gets the stops when they need them the most and defeat the Cyclones. No road magic for Iowa State and Matt Campbell this year. So those are your 5 biggest games going into Week 11. Plenty of them. None bigger than the battles of the unbeaten. Penn State and Minnesota. Certainly none bigger than LSU and Alabama. But you still have to keep in mind the other 3 games that we had that all have implications, whether it's pertaining to the playoff or whether it's pertaining to their respective conferences. Now, briefly, we do have to talk about our Heisman watch. We're nearing the end of the college football season, and it's got to be time to award the best player in the country. Now, you'll notice that we don't have anybody from Ohio State up here. We haven't forgotten about him. We have not forgotten about them. Justin Fields, J.K. Dobbins, and more specifically, Chase Young, who has a very good chance at winning the Heisman this year. Many people say he doesn't because he's a defensive player. That doesn't mean anything. If the Heisman truly is awarded to the best player in all of college football, Chase Young is and should be in consideration for the Heisman. They're not up there right now. Ohio State's coming off a bye week. They'll probably be back up there next week after a dominant performance, I would expect, against Maryland this Saturday. Now, I know people will say that Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, and Tua Tagovailoa were all coming off bye weeks as well. The reason they're up here, their stats haven't changed. They haven't changed since the last time we discussed about them and talked about them on our Heisman Watch. But the reason they're up here is because they have big games Saturday. More specifically, Joe Burrow and Tua. We mentioned with Jonathan Taylor, to solidify yourself as a Heisman contender, you have to perform well against elite opponents. You have to perform well on big stages and big games that matter. Not these cupcake teams, but big games. Joe Burrow and Tua Tagovailoa, assuming he plays, had the biggest game of 2019. They had the biggest game of Week 11. If Joe Burrow puts up numbers against this Alabama defense the way he's been doing all season long, go ahead and hand him the Heisman right now. If he doesn't, he's not out of the race, but he opens the door for many people like Tua, like Chuba Hubbard, like Jalen Hurts, like everybody at Ohio State to maybe contend for that trophy. So that's why they're up there right now. That's why Jalen Hurts is up there right now, because he has a chance to open the door. If Tua and Joe Burrow struggle, if this game between Alabama and LSU is a defensive slugfest like we saw back in 2011, Jalen Hurts has an opportunity to open the door and rise and improve his stock in the Heisman race. Same can be said for Chuba Hubbard, guys. He is not getting enough respect. The only player whose stats have changed, at least 4 we have up here, Hubbard rushed for 223 yards and 2 touchdowns against TCU. Had the most rushing yards against a Gary Patterson TCU-led team. Gary Patterson's been at TCU for 19 years. That's the most rushing yards he's allowed to one player in his 19-year coaching career with the Horned Frogs. That's pretty dang impressive. He averaged 11.2 yards per carry. And on the season, he's averaging 6.8 yards per carry, has 1,604 yards and 18 touchdowns. He has 4 games of at least 200 rushing yards, and he has at least 100 rushing yards in 8 of his 9 games he's played in this season. Guys, that is Heisman material. Do I think he will win it? No. Because I do think Joe Burrow will win it, and I do think he's the front runner right now. But like I said, crazy things happen. If Joe Burrow slows down, if Joe Burrow were to go down with an injury, if something crazy were to happen, like we saw last year between Kyler Murray and Tua, the door is open for Chuba Hubbard, arguably the best running back in the entire country right now. So a huge Week 11, guys. We said every other week, 7, 9, now 11. It's a big one, and you're not going to want to miss any spit of the action on Saturday. So do not miss these 5 biggest games. Keep an eye on these Heisman contenders. We have plenty of content coming your way. The newsletter's out. The college football playoff rankings come out tonight. We have a live stream for that later this evening. You're not going to want to miss our analysis as we look at the rankings live with you. We'll be watching the rankings being released, and we will be giving you our analysis right as they are being released. So you do not want to miss that. Do not miss our game of the week over LSU and Alabama. More detail on that game. Top 5 LSU-Alabama matchups, and then a game of the week between Penn State and Minnesota. Tons of analysis coming your way for arguably the biggest week of college football in 2019. So guys, thank you for watching us here on YouTube. Make sure to go follow us on Twitter at Gridiron Expert. Check out the official website, thegridironexpert.com. Sign up for the newsletter. Sign up for the expert picks. And as always, thank you for watching. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll see you next time on the Gridiron Expert.